Hello there. So today we're going to talk about how to find slopes from tables or word problems that are a little more challenging than we have looked at before. So in level 2, you guys have looked at the graphs and how we could identify slope as this idea of rise over run, or the change in the y values over the change in the x values. And that's exactly how we're going to look at for the tables and the word problems for these more complex linear growths that we're looking at. So just a reminder that slope is the exact same as your rise over run when we look at a graph. And this is also known as delta y over delta x, and delta represents change. So it's the change in the y values over the change in the x values. So what I want to point out here is we can look at the table and identify what the change in the y values are and what the change in the x values are. So if we look at this, our change in our y values, if we go from 10 to negative 6, we are decreasing by 4. And if we go from 6 to 2, we are decreasing by 4 again. If we go from 2 to negative 2, decreasing by 4, and negative 2 to negative 6, we are also decreasing by 4. Now we want to look at the change in our x values. If we go from 5 to negative 3, we are increasing by 2. From negative 3 to negative 1, we are increasing by 2. From negative 1 to positive 1, we are increasing by 2. And from 1 to 3, we are increasing by 2. So for our slope of this guy, our change in y is equal to negative 4, since we are decreasing by 4. And our change in x is equal to a positive 2, since we are increasing by 2. And so this gives us a nice fraction of negative 4 over 2, which we can simplify. Negative 4 divided by 2 is going to give us negative 2. So our slope for this table is going to be negative 2. For another example, once again, we are looking for that change in y over the change in x. So we can look at our change in y values from negative 10 to negative 5. We are increasing by 5. From negative 5 to 0, we are increasing by 5. 0 to 5. And 5 to 10 is always a constant increase of 5. Alright, now if we look at our change in the x values, from negative 2 to 0, we are increasing by 2. From 0 to 2 is an increase in 2. Same with 2 to 4, as well as 4 to 6. So in this case, our x values are increasing by a change of 2's. So once again, slope is going to be the change in our y values, which in this case was a positive 5, over the change in the x values, which in this case was a positive 2. And so we are going to get 5 over 2 for our slope. Now once again, we want to see if we can reduce this or simplify it at all. However, we cannot evenly do 5 divided by 2, and there's no other number besides 1 that can go into 5 and 2. So 5 over 2 is going to be our slope for this table. And then it's okay if you get a fraction for your slope, because that tells us on a graph from one point to the next how much our graph should go up and how much our graph should go over. It also tells us, once again, the change in the y values compared to the change in the x values. So it's okay if we do get a fractional slope. Alright. If we are given 2 coordinate points, we could create a mini table with these 2 coordinate points to identify our rise and our run. So we can go ahead and set up an xy table. Our first coordinate point, the x value is 4, the y value is 3. Our second coordinate point, the x value is 8, and the y value is 6. So something to note, even in our table, which I'll flip back here really quick, we really only needed to know 2 coordinate points to be able to identify our rise and our run. So even though we were given a bunch of other coordinate points for our table, we really only need to use 2. And that's why it's okay to just have 2 coordinate points in order to identify our slope. So once again, slope is going to be the change in the y over the change in the x value. So if we look, our change in our y from 3 to 6, we are increasing by 3. Our change in the x from 4 to 8, we are increasing by 4. So our change in y is going to equal positive 3. Our change in x is going to equal positive 4. And we cannot reduce 3/4, so our slope is going to equal 3/4. For our next problem, we can do the same exact thing. We have 2 coordinate points, so we can go ahead and set up an xy table with our coordinate points to help us solve for the slope. So our first coordinate point, the x value is 3, the y value is 2. Our second coordinate point, the x value is 5, the y value is 7. And then we need to figure out the change in y over the change of x. So y goes from -2 down to -7. So in this case, y is decreasing by 5. Our x value goes from 3 to 5, so our change in x is increasing by 2. So we can write out our change in x over change of y. Change of y, we got -5. For our change of x, we got a positive 2. And then because we cannot simplify -5 over 2, we are going to leave that as our slope. But once again, just remember, if we can simplify this, we definitely want to. Alright, finally we are given a situation that we need to find a slope for. So our situation is Becky has $20. She saved the same amount of money every month for 16 months. She now has $532. We want to know how much money did she save each month. Really, this question is asking, what is the slope? Alright. We can set up a table even for this. So we have an XY table. X is going to represent the months. Y is going to represent the amount of money that Becky has. So in month 0, this is going to be her starting month. Becky has $20. So we haven't passed any time yet. She started with $20. We know that. And then she saved some amount of money every month for 16 months. So now we are on month number 16. And she has $532. So now we've set up this really nice XY table. We can go ahead and use it to find our change in Y over our change in X. So our change in Y, we want to know how do we get from 20 all the way to 532. And we're going to do this by adding 512. So our change in Y is going to equal 512. Alright, our change in X, we are going from 0 to 16. So we are adding 16. So our change in X is going to be 16. Now we want to figure out, can we reduce, simplify, or just straight up divide 512 divided by 16? If you have a calculator, you can go ahead and use that. Otherwise, we can use our method of reducing. We notice that both of those numbers are even, so we can divide both of those numbers by 2. So 512 divided by 2 is going to be 256. And 16 divided by 2 is 8. We see that these numbers are even, so we can divide by 2 once again. And we get 128 divided by 4. Both of these numbers are even, so we can divide by 2 once again and get 64 divided by 2. And finally, since both of those numbers are even, we can divide once again and get 32 divided by 1. And we know anything divided by 1 is just itself. So 32 divided by 1 is going to be 32. And this is how much money Becky saves every single month. $32. So that is the slope, in essence, of our word problem.